So we're going to start off with Tony D, who's going to come up and read a letter from Jimmy K's daughter. She wanted to be here. She couldn't be. So I'm going to ask the newcomer to come up and read that letter. How can I help you? I don't want you to read it. Okay. Tony D, will you come up here and read it, please? You know, he has 39 years, but he's not into that old-timer group yet. Would somebody give me an empty chair, please?
My name's Tony D. I'm an addict, and I'm the newcomer, and I'm proud of it. I want to thank Ed for asking me to do this. Before I get started on this letter, some of you are at the 60-year anniversary, and you got to sign this book. This book comes from Russia, and the men in prison gave me this book to bring it back to the United States, and in the possibility that we may put a little bit of a note, a line, a paragraph to bring them some hope. These guys are locked down in a prison in Russia. So I'm going to pass it around. If you've already signed it, please pass it to the next person. And I trust, whoever you are, you will make sure I get this book back today. There's a pen in there. Yeah.
Speaker in the back to shut up, or I'm going to go to prison because I really want to hear this.
Okay.
Please.
All right, apparently there's some disturbance in the back. Some people talking and it's disturbing.
Fucking A, shut up.
And you got something real important to say, just stick around and you'll get to say it. I am truly blessed and honored that Ed would ask me to read this letter. Before I read this letter, I want to give you a little bit of history. Back in the 60s, of course, I was a young man, and I lived in Sun Valley, California. Occasionally, I worked in a place called Sorsico's Restaurant. It was a gangster hangout. It was a bar. It was a cocktail lounge. And it was owned by some very prominent people in that era. And I was a bar boy. And what fun that was. I got to do a lot. I got to learn a lot. My dad was a bouncer at this particular bar. His gumbare had owned the bar. And I used to get in a lot of trouble. I used to roll some people after I got out of work. There was a cop that always busted me. Same cop. He was always looking for me. His name was Larry. And I hated this guy, and he hated me because we would fight occasionally. And either one or both of us would go to the hospital before I went to jail. It always winded up in the same place. Well, there was another man that worked at that bar. His name was Billy. They called him Bill. And I didn't know anything about this man until years later when I got clean. And I was sitting at Jimmy Kennan's house, and I was stuffing envelopes like some of us did at that point. Of course, we didn't have stamps until Ed gave them to us, but we had envelopes to stuff. And this guy walks into Jimmy's house, which at that time was known as the World Service Office. And it shocked us both, he and I both. And little did I know, it was Jimmy Kennan's son. And apparently I had met him a long time before I had known Jimmy, and it was a shock. And at that particular time, I met Kathy and the rest of the family. And it turns out that that cop that I mentioned, Larry, eventually married Kathy. So it's a small world, and we have a lot of history. So today we laugh about some of those things. Of course, I forget things, and Larry reminds me occasionally of what a sweetheart of a guy that I was. So with that, I'm going to do the best I can with this letter. This letter is from Kathy Kennan, Jimmy Kennan's daughter. And it says, and it's really in honor of Ed, but it's information that she wanted all of you to have. And she loves Ed and Chuck and, of course, a number of other people that have been around a while. Gene and so on, and of course, Bob. It says, hello, my name is Kathy, and I'm an addict. I'm not going to go through this letter filling anything in, but Kathy realized that she was an addict while she was writing the book about her dad. And then she started to go to fellowship and practice these principles and enjoy the wonders that our fellowship has to offer. I would like to thank my higher power, God, for all I have today. Also, I welcome the newcomer, as you are the most important person in these rooms. I feel honored that Ed asked me to send a few words for him to read, as I am too ill to travel. I am sorry I cannot attend this beautiful celebration. As much as I love the newcomer, the old-timer holds a special place in my heart. I am not going to get into the early history of Narcotics Anonymous, as that would take up too much time. It can be found on the internet, however. What I can tell you, if you are new and want this program, and want what this program can offer, continue with your sponsor and your meetings, but find an old timer. They are the amazing members of Narcotics Anonymous you will ever speak to. They will tell you like it is, with love, honesty, and a wealth of knowledge. My mentor has 52 years clean. I trust him with all my life. When I ask him for advice, it may not be what I want to hear, but his answer always guides me in the right direction. Today, I feel many of us take for granted going to meetings a few blocks or a few miles from our home. We take for granted our literature and our basic texts. In the mid-60s to 70s, there were too few meetings, no literature, and no basic text. The old-timers struggled through it. They started meetings with an old coffee pot, a few coffee cups that they had passed around, and sugar if they had it, and no literature. Eventually, they wrote the literature, started more meetings, and worked on the basic text with little or no money. Nobody had money back then in those days. You were lucky to be able to pay your rent. I know these things because I grew up with Jimmy. Times were hard. I was a small kid, but I remember. I have no regrets today. It was what it was. The old timers gave us what we have today. I call it Easy Street. admire their tenacity. We really have no reason to whine. So we may have to secretary an extra meeting once in a while, or cover a position sometime, as long as it does not take away from our families. I say go for it. My first obligation is staying clean. My second is to my family and the service work. I have to keep my priorities straight. I say this because my dad put his recovery first, Narcotics Anonymous next, and the family when he had time for us. It is vital to continue fighting the war against drugs by extending our love, our hearts, and opening our arms out to the still suffering addicts. That is and always will be our primary purpose. Congratulations, Ed, on your 50 years clean. God bless you. We remember, we will remain prisoners of our own demise if we choose not to let others in. Blessings. Thank you very much.
Let's have a moment of silence for Kathy. She's not very well. Her mentor she's talking about will be the next speaker. It happens to be my friend of 52 years, Jean Hay. I love this lady. You know, she's very nice, very kind, and you have no idea. You have no idea what this family gave up so we could have this program. I am probably the oldest living person who have gone to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. I first made my first meeting in 1949 at Lexington Federal Drug Rehabilitation Center. And some people know there was an East Coast NA. And I went there for 5 times and it didn't interest me. And I had to go on spend several more years of my life playing the game, and I finally came back to NA in 1962 for a friend of Jimmy's, went up the wall of prison because I lived in prisons. He brought the program up there. And for the first time in my life, I thought there was an opportunity, maybe now, that I would find this program. And I started writing Jimmy in 62. When I got out of prison in 64, I came down to Los Angeles, and he'd come down and pick me up and took me to his home. But he also took my 23 months away. And I'll tell you one thing, what Jimmy said, and you better believe him. So I didn't argue with him, because no way did I think I'd be alive 50 years later. So that's a little bit of my story. The next guy's going to speak. It probably goes back to NA longer than anyone in the history of the program. He was around when it was originally found. So believe me, he's going to speak for a half hour. At the end of half hour, everyone stand up and start clapping, because that's the shortest speech he's ever made in his life. When he's asked to speak at conventions, he requires 3 hours. Okay? But we just sent him to Portland last weekend and he talked for 3 hours. So today he promised me he was only going to talk for a half hour. But when he opens this program, he's going to open it with a prayer. If that bothers you, again, talk to your sponsor. I'm going to send you back to your sponsor many times today. Because today this man is a pastor. He's a pastor with prison system in the state of Oregon. And I knew this man for a long time, and I consider him my very closest friend. Jean Hay, will you come up and tell us the story?
Well, my name is Gene, and I'm an acceptable, responsible, and productive member of Narcotics Anonymous. And I only say that because it's true. And if you can't say that, stick around. Now, you need to say that as soon as you can. We read it at every single meeting. I didn't get a very good response on that, and that's fine, because what I think is happening is people are thinking about it, and that's what I want you to do. Think about it. Why am I here? To teach you, to show you, share my experience. Tell you about the wisdom that I've learned in 52 years. Tell you about some of my stupidity during those 52 years. Well, one thing is that I decided to do, you know, Ed said that I need to stop in a half an hour. So I'm going to look at my watch. But more than that, what I decided, I'm a pretty creative person. So what I decided to do was not to go to the bathroom this morning when I got here. And so now I've got to go. Bad. So I think that's going to help me cut it short. I'm pretty sure it will. So, hey Joe, where's Joe Galvo? Huh? Hey, give me my little note, the one we talked about. Everybody. Anyway, so I was sitting there this morning, you know, making notes about what I was going to say. And I happened to run into a guy that was the most important guy here. And I spent all morning talking to him. And his name is Patrick. He had 41 days. Jimmy taught me that. He said, when you're up there talking, all you're doing is talking. You're not important. The important guy is sitting out there, you know? So I never forgot that. So I shared some things with Patrick about what's been written about the people that have been around a long time. And about time on the program, and importance about time on the program. Time is extremely important, but I think this little book right here, Living Clean, explains it much better than I can. Because this is what it meant to me. And so on page 220 in Living Clean, it says, there's no substitute for time and recovery. It gives us a chance to heal, to grow up, start over, and build our lives that matter to us and to the people around us. But time itself doesn't heal us, grow us up, or start us over. What matters most are the actions we take. Consistent application of the tools of recovery changes us. The process is ongoing. We don't just work the steps, we come to live them. They shape how we think, how we feel, and how we respond to the world. The steps teach us to grow up and help others. We learn to love ourselves by speaking the truth, accepting our assets, is part of our amends to ourselves. But more importantly, it begins the process by which we make our amends to society. And the sooner we make our amends to society, the sooner that we become acceptable, responsible, and productive members of that society. Powerful book. Powerful book. Now, I'd like to, since I'm the first speaker and stuff, and everybody thinks I'm important, I want to tell you how important I am. And I want to tell you about how I decide to speak to you. I don't talk much about the old life, or all the exciting things I did, or the things that would stimulate your emotions. I don't talk about that. I'm tired of listening to that. I want to listen to sincerity. I want to listen to honesty. I don't want anybody talking to me, building some kind of a tremendous story that's going to stimulate my emotions. I want you to stimulate my heart, my soul, and my spirit. And that's what happens when I talk to guys like Patrick. That's what he does to me. He stimulates my spirit and my heart. And I see recovery. And what I do, I don't sponsor anybody, but I've got a number of people like Patrick that I call 30-day wonders. And they're all with people that are less than a couple months on the program. And I tell them, if you want to connect with me, you can do it. And I'm going to give you my phone number, and I want you to call me every 30 days and tell me you got another 30 days. So I'm going to stimulate your heart, your soul, and your spirit. And this is why I have to read about humility every time I speak. Because this is how I need to react to who you are and who you think I am. So I'm a Christian also. I don't apologize for that either, because this book here, Living Clean, tells us that our spirituality grows in stages, in stages, in stages. And what I find that that people with a lot of time on the program, approaching 40 years, 50 years, have reached a spiritual height, that they have a God that they really understand, that makes sense to them, that they can pray to and listen to, and who answers them. Lord, I'm far too much influenced by what people think about me. That means you. Which means that I'm always pretending to be either richer or smarter or nicer than I really am. Please prevent me from trying to attract attention. Don't let me gloat over praise on one hand or be discouraged by criticism on the other. Nor let me waste time weaving imaginary situations in which the heroic, charming, witty person is myself. Show me how to be humble of heart like you. That's my higher power. I know what kind of humility he has. And that's what I follow. Because it makes more sense to me than anything that I've ever found in Narcotics Anonymous. Now, Ed mentioned that I'm a chaplain with the Oregon Department of Corrections. I think the reason that I'm a chaplain is because they didn't do a background check on me. So anyway, what I did was I'm basically not a good guy. NA's taught me to be a lot better. But anyway, I started a ministry called Connecting Point Ministries. And this is what it says. Connecting Point Ministries, connecting hope to the brokenhearted. Then it shows a little symbol of a man, the connection, Chaplain Gene Hay. I'm the connection now, you know. And it feels good to be the connection that's going to give something that's going to improve your life. It's not going to destroy you. It's not going to fool you and tell you you can feel good right now when you stick that needle in your arm and take that pill or whatever you do. But I'm going to give you something that's going to last, you know. And we don't have a recovery house or treatment center or anything else. We have a place for people with broken hearts. And these are the kind of people that we have in our home. The perplexed, the poor, the defenseless, the helpless, the weak, the sick, the failures, the dejected, the doubting and the doubted, the wreckers and the wrecked, people others avoid who don't look normal, who have lost the will to fight on. God arranges to meet us. And we've got people of all areas of life. We deal a lot with people that have mental health issues, have drug and alcohol issues, that have homeless issues. Where's Joe? So what we decided to do, well, sit down. Joe's a nice guy and he's my best friend, but he doesn't obey well. But the only way I can get him to obey is to embarrass him in front of 450 people. And he'll obey me then for about a week. So, anyway, but Joe is part of the History Gypsies, Ed is part of the History Gypsies, and Tacoma Tom and Generous Gene. Now, I'm very generous, but I'm broke, but I'm very generous with my words, so I have to be careful. And I got to go to the toilet. So I'm going to read this real fast. But you know, everybody wants somebody to record their history, you know? And this is the very first time that a guy like Ted is my driver, Ed is my friend. And Ed's the guy that put this stuff on. I want you to know that. It wasn't Ted, it was Ed. Okay? So anyway, everybody wanted somebody to record the history of Narcotics Anonymous. And everybody's talking about it, and everybody said somebody needs to do it, you know? And so Ed and Joe and I and Tommy found a little story that told us about who's going to do it and who's not going to do it. And this is a story, a little story about four people named Everybody, Somebody, Anybody, and Nobody. There was an important job to be done, and everybody was sure that somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought that anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. And we're doing it. We're doing it. And thanks, Joe. And we do it mostly on our own nickel. You know, we've traveled all over. Some people have paid us to go to different states to talk on the history and stuff. Ed was right. About 3 weeks ago in Portland, I tell people, if you want me to talk, you've got to give me at least 2 hours. So in Portland, I can't believe it, they sent out this little newsletter about their meeting, and they said that this could be the last meeting, the last testimony that Gene Hayes will ever do. I told him I had liver cancer, I got over it. Now I got a problem with my lungs that's a result of asbestos exposure, and I breathe hard. I mean, it's hard to catch my breath, but I can still breathe and I can still talk. So what's the problem? The problem is I talk too much. So, but anyway, so we decided to do something about it, and that's what we've done, and that's why Ed has put this thing on, and there's the camera, and that's recording our history.
And we decided we were going to have a convention, and that became Mel's project, and he's going to tell you about the World Convention. So please, take a seat, keep the ears open and the mouth shut so you can learn what the hell we're trying to tell you. Thank you. Mel, will you come up and tell them about the first World Convention?
Good afternoon. My name is Mel. I'm an addict. Well, Gene took about 20 minutes of my time, so I got to talk fast. Huh? I'm just kidding. First of all, I want to thank Ed for asking me to participate in this and wish him a happy birthday. 50 years is a long time, and I've known him for over 45 years myself. You know, I came out of CRC back in October the 7th of 1968 and did not know what I had to store for me. All I know is there was a little red-headed guy that went to the other program who also went to the very first NA meeting with Jimmy K. A guy by the name of Eddie C. As Cochran, he's dead, so. And he shared the message and the hope while in that institution about Narcotics Anonymous. And at those days, you were able to get phone numbers of people that were coming in carrying panels, and he gave me his phone number, and I called him up when I got out. I said, "Hey Ed, this is Mel." He says, "Who?" And I said, "Mel, I met you at CRC." He says, "Really?" And I says, "You told me to call you when I get out." And he says, "You know, I've been doing H&I for 15 years and not one single person's ever called me." And I met him at a meeting, and I couldn't find any NA meetings either. For all I knew, all I figured out, there was maybe 5 meetings in the world, but it took me 2.5 months to find them. So that gave me a little encouragement to go someplace else, learn about the steps. I was scared to death. Eddie would have me speak when he overbooked himself, and that really was embarrassing. But I found NA. I got a hold of Jimmy. I went to the first meeting, and NA was Moore Park and Rhodes, and I found that to be a pretty decent meeting. And then I thought to myself, well, it's time for me to start a meeting, because I live in Whittier, and everything else is out in San Fernando Valley or out in Manhattan Beach, or one was in Los Angeles, the Magdalenos did. And so I put together a meeting in La Mirada and gave lit a fire under some other people, and some more meetings were born. So then we had 10 meetings. And that was cool. Well, they asked me to be part of, well, I wanted to be part of the business goings-ons of Narcotics Anonymous, and I stepped up to the plate and became chairman of the General Service Office, which was we didn't have an office. Like somebody said, everything was in Bob's trunk. But we had a place, I think it was MPP, where we met, and we had meetings down there until we started to get more established. And people saw that I was on fire for Narcotics Anonymous. And it wasn't, well, actually I'm putting a cart before the horse. I got kind of just insane wanting this thing to really fly. One day I went up to Bob and I said, Bob, I'd like to have a world convention. And he said, well, where are you going to have that, Bill? And I said, well, maybe the Anaheim Convention Center or LA Convention Center. He laughed. He said, man, that's the funniest thing I ever heard. He says, where are you going to get that many people and where are you going to get that kind of money? And I stopped and thought about it. He was right. There was just no way we were going to get to do it that way. So I put together a committee. Oh boy. I was on the committee because it was my brainstorm. I had a dream. I had a dream to have this thing. And so we got together. It was Sally, who's in the hospital. Unfortunately can't be here today. A lady by the name of Mari, Norm, Richard Montoya. I think there was one or two other people on that committee. Carl, you weren't on that, were you? No. And we met once every couple weeks, and we just started putting this thing together. And we had it at the La Mirada Country Club in November of 1971. I get a little emotional when I think about that because it was quite a weekend. We had 250 people that showed up, 185 paid. The rest were recovery houses from Northern California. And in fact, a couple of recovery houses spent the night on my floor at my house because they didn't have money to go to a motel or hotel. And the meeting, oh, here we go again. I drew a bunch of stuff. I looked through everything I could find in my file cabinets for all this stuff that I had relating to this, and I'll be darned if I haven't probably lost some of it. But we had an opening Friday night meeting, and I think a guy named Jack Whaley spoke. He was a funny kind of guy. He's the kind of guy that if you shared at a meeting, he'd throw a chair at you if you didn't share recovery. You know, sit down and shut up. You don't know nothing. He'd start throwing chairs at you. Oh man, that's a kind of a fun place to be. He wouldn't talk to a newcomer unless he had 2 years, because he would feel he didn't want to get involved emotionally with you and have you go back out and mess things up. So I went up to him every Friday night and says, hey, Jack, how you doing? He says, oh, I'm okay. I've been thinking about you. He says, that's funny, I don't think about you at all. So every Friday night I'd show up at this meeting and I'd say, hey, Jack, how you doing? And I wouldn't say that last part again. I didn't want to get my feelings hurt. But he, after 2 years, allowed me into his life, and we had a really good relationship. And I got to go have dinner with him, and it was just kind of cool. But he was our opening Friday night speaker, and he always talked about squeezing little baby chicken heads. I didn't quite understand that. He killed a lot of chicken heads, I tell you. Ed was our MC for most of the convention. Bob also did some of that stuff, but the meeting was just there, and we had fun. And it wasn't until the 50th anniversary of Narcotics Anonymous at San Diego, the convention center, where they asked me to be part of the team and share about Moore Park and Roads. It was about, I don't know, there's 10 of us. I think Jack led the meeting, in fact. Jack B led the meeting, and we, 7 of us got to share, and I forgot as emotional then as I did right now, and there was 25,000 people at that convention that could afford to go to it. And it let me know the growth of, how the growth of Narcotics Anonymous really was. Am I stepping on cords? Yeah, probably am. Little guy with bad feet. Next, Jimmy Kay was the banquet speaker, if I'm not mistaken. And my sponsor, Eddie, spoke there too. And that was kind of good. I just don't remember what night or what day, part of the day, because we had workshops there. Ed led a workshop with Dorothy, a gal named Dorothy that was she wasn't an addict, was she? No, she was a non-addict, but she did some stuff there. And another guy that introduced the world to the court card, Leon Emerson, was there, and he shared too. And Leon and I had a great relationship. I went to his place with Eddie C. in his chambers late one night, and he was doing an alcohol school, and I put my hand up and I said, hey, drugs are a substitute for alcohol, and alcohol is the oldest known drug. Why isn't the addict getting the same privileges to these meetings and recovery? And he slapped his forehead and says, Mel, you have a great idea. So he changed the name of his little program, and that's where some of you that were blessed coming to these meetings and getting a court card signed, it's my fault, but don't hurt me after this is over. That was the beginning. The first meeting was emotional. I have pictures, in fact, that Gene got me of us, and hey, I was about 80 pounds lighter, and I had dark brown hair, no beard, but I had an afro. It was really cool. And Bob was skinny, and you were skinny too. Yeah, this guy was thin once too. And as we get older, I used to tell people I have dark brown hair in my own teeth when I got here, and now it's all white, and I put my teeth in a jar, so they were good. We won't go there. I just did, didn't I? The reason that the first convention happened was that somewhere along the line, when I was in that penitentiary, the hope was thrown at me, and the hope was told to me that I could be anything I wanted to be and do anything I want to do, and I can do it without drugs, and I can do it without the other stuff too. I can have a life that's beyond my wildest imagination. All I had to do is change everything that I've ever thought and everything that I've ever felt. I had to work the steps and recreate who I thought I would be into something that I should be. And so I took that literally, but I didn't do it all at the beginning. I made a lot of mistakes, and then I started to work the steps, and I started to feel what this thing was all about. So my whole goal in life, whether it's a place like this, celebrating Ed's 50th birthday, talking about the World First Convention, it's always trying to give that hope to the newcomer. And I have that same excitement inside me today, as Gene was talking about, a guy with 42 days, or I think it was 42 days. I love to see newcomers come to meetings. I love to extend my hand and just chit-chat a little bit and give them that same thing that was given to me. If you don't have that inside of you and you're just trying to keep what you have and not want to give it away, that's miserable. The NA First Convention gave it away. We walked out of there with tears. We walked out of there with hope. We walked out of there with a great idea. You know what? They're still having these conventions, maybe not quite as often. The second convention what happened was out in the San Fernando Valley, and the third one was, I believe, up in San Jose. The fourth one was back down in Orange County. That was some fun times, guys. I don't know. I'm glad I don't have to talk long. I'm glad Gene took some of my time. he told me I had to talk a long time, and I says, you know, I don't really want to talk that long. I just want to get my point across about the World Convention and sit down and shut up. And so that's what I think I'm going to do. But you know what? I'm glad you're all here helping Ed celebrate his 50th. That's the most important thing.
Thank you, Mel. Mel didn't tell you, in 1971, we had less people on the program of Narcotics Anonymous than we have in this room tonight. NA was 18 years old, and we didn't even have 450 people in the world on this program. It started growing because people like Mel and myself and Judge Leon Emerson decided we were going to send people to court gardens to the CRC. Now that Jimmy K hated that, that's in violation of the traditions, you know. But if we didn't violate the tradition, there's still people out there not knowing where to go. I'm going to introduce the next guy. Everyone in this room has had a chip in their life, but none of you probably know where that chip came from. So Jim, will you come up and tell us about the chip? You know, I'd really like him to tell about If he had more time, he could tell you for 40 some odd years he's been running Impact Drug Rehab Center. We go a lot with this guy, but he wanted to talk about chips. So he's going to tell you about the chips. He's got 10 minutes and you need to learn about this.
This thing I heard there was I had 10 minutes. A lot of names have been mentioned. Hugh Alcott was one of them that some of you Froleys might have remembered. Maury Wolf, Judge Emerson. Remember Judge Emerson when we were, some of the guys that kind of started Impact got to know him and they were sent to treatment by Judge Emerson. And what was unique about that was he allowed us to, he began to allow men and women to come to treatment in lieu of going to jail, which was kind of unique at the time. And we literally got to go back behind the chambers, back in chambers where they had to lock up and actually talk to clients and say, hey, you'd like to be introduced. And we had an opportunity to talk about the program of Narcotics Anonymous. I too, like everybody else that's been up here, you know, there weren't that many meetings. I remember going to, I saw Carl Baggett here somewhere, but like Carl, Jim Stillwell, if you don't remember. Dr. Tennant had a meeting out at his place, and we came from, at that time, we were over on Robertson, when I came in, it was on Robertson Boulevard. We'd drive clear the hell out to, I thought it was the other side of the moon, to attend an NA meeting. I remember sitting on desks and file cabinets and things like that, just to kind of get packed into this one little room. And I think what hooked me most, I came in and left and came back in, and a guy named Ed Burke cut my hair and shaved my head off, my hair off. Got my attention, then they kicked me out. When I came back, it was the attractions rather than promotion. It was the men and women that I were here and talk to me and carry the message to me. Jack Whaley, one of them, Bobby Earl, another one. And there's some guys from the other fellowship, because you couldn't go to an NA meeting every night of the week. It was impossible. You had a jet or something. I was sitting over there thinking about the time when I went through that confusion of, hi, my name's Jim, I'm an addict and an alcoholic. Somebody told me, I think it must have been my sponsor, he said, you know what, is there any reason to really break it down into little parts like that? If you're in the NA meeting, you identify as an addict. If you're in the other fellowship, you identify as whatever that fellowship is. And I've tried to do everything I can in my position to try to end that little bit of confusion. Some people insist on getting up and saying I'm a heroin addict and I smoke pot and I'm a father raper or whatever. Just keep that short. It's not necessary for all the explanation. The chips. It was a little thing inside Impact. This isn't anything to talk about. Impact, they call it Impact Industries. And we're just trying to make a buck. So Ben Weidenbender, the director at the time, he came up with this. When I got this little hot stamp manual print machine, we bought some blank chips, and I have I don't really look at these. I just remember they were in a drawer somewhere. But there's the original 4 right there. And they said 30 days clean, sober, Impact Group. In the back it said we care. We started sitting up at night. In the middle of the night, there was, sometimes 10 people, taking turns on working this little printing kind of a machine. And things got better. We got a better machine. We got one with an electric pedal on it, so you could really just start knocking them out. At 3 o'clock in the morning, you get a little lazy and sleepy, and I put the new chipset Easy Does It on it, and I had the word "does it" stamped on my thumb. A few other people did too. The chips were, I don't think there was anything around like at the time. It was just an acknowledgement of those first, points in recovery. When you come in, it was nice to have a little something. Now I've seen after a few years, I was seeing guys come in with, 12, 30-day chips on their coffee cup or something like that. So we got to print more 30-day chips, it looks like. But it was something that kind of took off. Now what happened was there wasn't a big Narcotics Anonymous directory, but there was a fairly good-sized Alcoholics Anonymous directory. So I started using those 2 documents as a mailing list, because I was in charge of sending out these little 3x5 postcards and saying, well, this is how much they cost. This is for 30 and for 60 and for 100. And business was good. I mean, we're selling chips, and we were getting different dyes made, so it didn't say Impact Group on it. I can't remember if we had an NA logo on it or not. But anyway, we didn't get permission. If we did, we didn't have permission to do that. So I got, the director got a call from Jimmy Kennan, and there was a conversation. He was in the office across from mine, and he just called me in and said, hey, Jimmy wants to talk to you. I said, oh, good, maybe he likes what I'm doing. And he asked me something about the chips. He says, business going good? I mean, he blindsided me. He kind of tricked me to having a conversation about how good the chip business was. He asked me, do you work the steps? I said, I do work the steps. He says, how about the traditions? I said, read them at meetings, and I'm not a real scholar of the traditions. You know anything about that 6th tradition? We're not affiliated. And it took me a minute to register, and that was it. That was I stopped doing it, but the good news, bad news is that there were already so many meetings that were buying chips, I couldn't stop it. It just kind of kept coming. And needless to say, a lot of other people got in the business, and we just didn't care about it that much. But there's still, somewhere in this world, there's some newcomers, or guys that were newcomers and women that were newcomers, that are still carrying those first 4 chips that they got as a remembrance of the time that they got at Narcotics Anonymous meeting. 10 minutes is up. Thank you very much for your time.
What he didn't tell you, that he's also been the manager or the director of Impact Recovery System for, I don't know, 30 or 40 years, him and his wife, and he could tell you that a lot of people who walked in and out of the rooms of recovery, and that's why they're sitting here today. If I was to tell you, and he didn't grow until we started violating the traditions, you would be surprised, but when I started the first recovery house with Bill Beck of the United States, it was in San Jose, California. And we started the second house down here in San Fernando Valley called Reprieve House. And Bill and I split up because either one of us could know how to zip it up, and we had a little problem. And he went off and formed Impact with some other people, and I went to Palmdale General and started a detox facility. Jimmy wasn't too happy about any of them things. And the next guy is going to talk to you. He's going to talk to you about running a recovery house for 40 some odd years. And then you go into his office, and the breezeway, you look up there, you can see Jimmy K's picture, but you all can see Bill Beck's picture. And those people who never had a chance to know Bill Beck, he probably, other than Jimmy K, was a person more attracted to carrying this message than anyone else. I loved the man. He was my brother. I hated his guts at times, you know. And tell you a little story. I come from the New York Syndicate. I took a little friend of mine from the syndicate's daughter to my recovery house, and he called me that night and said, "I'd like to talk to your daughter, my daughter." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry, she's out with Bill and a couple other people doing a meeting." Next morning he called and said, "Where is my daughter?" And I didn't know that Bill Beck had taken my car and his daughter and went to Vegas and got married. The guy said, "Well, I hate to tell you this, but if you don't have her home by 5 o'clock tonight, there's a contract on you and Bill both." Bill called me and I said, "Bill, where the hell are you are?" He said, "I'm on the whorehouse over on Ventura Boulevard." And I says, "Thank you, brother, but you're going to get yourself and me killed." He says, "Nah, he can't do anything. I married the damn girl." So it was kind of, I hate not to tell this story. And I said, "Bill, would you bring my car back and bring Leslie back?" He says, "I can't. I have some marijuana here, and I don't know what to do with it." I said, "Well, call Charlie Manson. He'll come and get the damn thing." I got over to the house. He didn't have a package. He had a bale. I don't know if any people know what the size of a bale of marijuana was. And I wasn't about to go to the penitentiary, so Charlie come down and picked up the bale and took it out to the ranch, and I'm sure they had a good time with it. But anyways, what's more important is recovery. And the next guy, it's an honor to know him. He's carried this message. He cannot tell you the thousands of people he's probably touched in this program. And Jack B., will you come up and tell us about running a recovery house?
Hi, my name's Jack. I'm an addict. And I'm not sure I want to follow that. I'm not sure I can. But I have some notes, so I'm going to read them, at least these few notes, word for word. "I owe my recovery to my wife. She works an excellent program and has inspired me to work the heck out of the steps and pray a lot, and I have the scars to prove it. I follow instruction, darling. I love you. Thanks for the scars and all the motivation. Congratulations, Ed. And thanks for asking me to share. I find a common theme in a lot of what happens up here so far, and I expect it'll continue. What's his name again? At least the way I remember it, the word memory comes into play a lot. You know, the great thing is, most of you weren't there. I could tell the story any way I want. Because even the guys that were there are not sure it's not accurate. They start questioning themselves. That's not the way I remember it. So, I don't remember leading the meeting, the Moore Park meeting at the convention. I think I was just a participant like you, but I sat there saying, well, did I lead the meeting? don't know. I know I was there, so that's still a good thing. You know, a couple of us were talking about Recovery House, and you know, I'm a product of a recovery house, and violating the traditions. I thank God every day for that, because I knew nothing about 12-step programs before I got here. I knew nothing about recovery houses. I knew that there was a couple when I was in New York, and some people went into them, and they came out lunatics. Even if they didn't use, they had nothing I wanted, and they all fell eventually anyway. So I literally did not know anybody that was clean. I came out to California because I knew nobody could stay clean in New York, and eventually had a friend of mine staying with me in Hollywood from New York, and he asked me about programs, which I knew nothing about. And I was living with a girl then that worked for an attorney, and I told her, go get some numbers of recovery houses, because he needs one. And she came home that night with a list of, I don't know, 7 to 10 numbers. And I don't even know if they had names attached to them or were just numbers. I don't remember. And I picked one of them, and I called, and somebody answered the phone, World Service Office of Narcotics Anonymous. I didn't know at the time that it was Jimmy's house. And all I wanted was, do you know about a recovery house? My friend needs to get in one. And he said, yeah, there's one that just opened 3 or 4 days ago right down the street. I said, give me the number. He did. He gave me the number, and I called. I got a hold of Bill Beck. And by then I came up with the brilliant conclusion that I can't let my partner go into this recovery house with all those crazy dope fiends by himself. I got to go with him and take, you know. And so I set up an interview with Bill Beck to get into Cry Help. Now, why we needed an interview, I don't know. The place was a dump. It really was. And so that morning we were going from Hollywood to the Valley, which I'd never been in before. Never been to the Valley. This was like a big excursion from Hollywood to the Valley to meet with this guy. And so I dropped a handful of reds and shot some dope and went for my interview. I bet you Impact still has, just like us in the rules, don't show up loaded. That's what the last thing Bill Beck told me when I left the interview. He said, if you show up, your nose better be running. Okay. So we talked. I heard about Narcotics Anonymous for a while, and then he told me it cost $200 to get in. I thought, if I had $200, I wouldn't need your stinking program. But somebody else figured I needed that stinking program, and somebody else got the $200 to get me in. Actually, when I got home, what's interesting, me and my partner didn't plan this. I guess he called his father in New York to get the money, and the money came in $250. I told the girl I was living with that it cost $250 to get in the program. He told his father it cost $250 to get in the program, and I don't. If I have to explain to you why we did that, I'm not sure about you. And needless to say, I didn't show up with my nose running. But I did show up, and I mean, Cry Help had nothing then. Literally, there wasn't any food. We sold raffle tickets in parking lots to make money. Maybe, I'm going to exaggerate here, that maybe a third of the money actually made it to Bill. Probably most of the people took their money that they sold tickets and bought dope with it And us spiritual guys, I didn't buy dope, but I did pocket money because I had to keep my clothes habit going. And cigarettes and, you know, survival money. And treatment, the word treatment didn't exist yet. We were recovery houses. I don't think the word treatment existed, and there wasn't a whole heck of a lot of groups because we wouldn't have known what to do in them. There wasn't a whole lot of therapy. There was go to meetings, go to lots of meetings. So we went to lots of meetings, and as Mel said, you know, we were only able to get to 3 NA meetings a week, and we usually went to them religiously. Monday, Moore Park. Wednesday, candlelight meeting. Chuck was the secretary of that. I love the candlelight meeting because it was just candles. It was dark, didn't feel intimidated, and the best thing about it was when the lights came on at the end of the meeting, we always had to pick up 2 or 3 people off the floor that passed out during the meeting. I miss that. You hardly ever see anybody loaded in a meeting anymore. What's up with that? It was, yeah, I knew I was in the right place by those kinds of things, you know, because the recovery stuff wasn't something that I understood or recognized. It didn't make me feel comfortable. It was something that seemed unattainable, but seeing somebody loaded made me feel, okay, this is where I belong. I remember the first time I heard something that just inspired me, that made me know I was in the right place, and it actually came from my partner that I checked into Cry Help with. He said, my name's Mark, and he's dead now. He said, my name's Al, I'm an addict, and all I want to do is shoot some dope. And I said, yes! Why? Because I knew he was telling the truth. I didn't know if the rest of you guys that were sharing all the spiritual stuff were telling the truth. Yeah. Recovery houses are, you know, are now treatment centers, and, you know, Impact's not the little place it was. Cry Help's not the little place it was. I guess I can end with this. The progression of me becoming the director, to me, has nothing to do with me. It's got literally nothing to do with me. I had no idea I could possibly stay clean. I eventually began staying clean. I began working the program. I eventually, after 13 months, left Cry Help. Why did I leave Cry Help? Because I came up with a brilliant plan. Chuck likes to say, watch out when Jack has a plan. Well, I came up with a brilliant plan to go to New York to show my mother what a wonderful job I'd done with my life. While in New York, I shot dope. I came back from New York, and I left Cry Help. You know, 13 months I'd been living there. It was about time I got out of there, and it took me getting loaded to leave. So I left, and I went to work for somebody on the program, and when they closed their business down, I needed a job. I went back to Bill. I said, you got a job for me? So he hired me. As I don't remember what we were called back then, and there we go again, I don't remember. I don't remember what we were called then, and it doesn't matter. I got a job. I began working, eventually married Beck, who was Bill Beck's wife at that time, and the assistant executive director for some reason left being the assistant director, so the job became available, and me and 2 other guys applied for it. To this day, I'm telling you the God's honest truth. If I had anything to do with deciding who got the job as the assistant executive director, it would have been either one of the other 2 guys. They had good resumes. Good resumes were not common amongst people in the program 40 years ago, 43 years ago. Most of us never had a job. And I didn't have much of a resume. But for some reason, when the decision was made, Bill called me in and said, "Job's yours." He left. I knew where the office was, but that's about all I knew. And I went in that office, and I closed the door, because now I realized I applied for a job that I knew nothing about. And I looked at the ceiling, basically looking for God, looking for help. What do I do now? I don't know nothing about being an assistant executive director. I don't know anything about running anything. I can barely run my own life. I only had maybe 2 years of that. And I told God then, I said, "God, you want me to have this job? Apparently, you do. You're going to have to do this job for me, because I have absolutely no idea how to do what I have in front of me." I've been saying that for the last 42 years. I still don't know how to run the program. I still struggle with running my own life, let alone the program, and be responsible for other people's lives. The first thing I had to say, the very first time Bill asked me if I wanted a job as a resident, whatever we were called then, is I remember thinking, well, the only reasons I thought that I wanted the job when I was a client was it would give me the ability to get away with even more than I was already getting away with. And so I thought, gee, and I asked Bill, I said, "Bill, does this mean that I have to give a damn about anybody?" And he said, "No." I said, "I'll take the job." I don't bring much into it. To me, the fact that so many good things have occurred and so many people's lives have been touched as a result of Cry Help. And I have to say, impact also, because I know when I came in, Bill told me what the plan, Bill told me that the starting of the recovery houses, part of the reason for starting the recovery houses was to help the growth of Narcotics Anonymous. And I'm convinced that because of Impact and Cry Help, a lot of growth occurred in Narcotics Anonymous. And the people that went through those programs have done a whole heck of a lot to further the program, and I'm blessed to be able to be a part of that. I thank you for asking me and inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be in a room with so many people that have more time clean than me. God bless you. Thank you.
I think by now you might know where we're going here. This room is called BTBT, and that stands before the basic text. These people who are talking today came around here when we had nothing, no literature, no big book, no nothing, only the desire to stay clean. He talks about his recovery house and what a dump it was. You ought to see mine. I had 60 beds in one room, one bathroom. The men used the bushes, the girls went to the bathroom. For food we ate day-old bread, rotten vegetables after they were cut out, bent cans so it was succotash every night. I made speaking engagements where I would get enough to buy hamburger or hot dogs, and the cost of going there was zero. We didn't charge an addict anything. And today there are people clean over 40 some odd years that came out of that first recovery house. There was a need, because in the old days you would get a call and it was probably Gene's wife, Tilly. We loved her to death. She answered the phone for Narcotics Anonymous, and you would go out on a 12-step call, and you would take the addict back to your house and put him on the couch, because there was no recovery house. And the next day you had to go to work, and when you come home that night you didn't have nothing left. You know, and it never happened to me that people used to say, "Ed, how come they never steal from you?" Because I wrote a sign. I said, asshole, there's 20 bucks on the table. That's all I got. I just got out of the joint. I had 50 bucks in the set of the khakis. Don't fuck with my stuff. Okay? Take the $20 and go do your thing. And I never lost a dime. One time, about 10 years later, the guy came and gave me $20 back. He said, I had to have it. I had to have it. And here's your 10 bucks. Today he's clean 36 years. You know, we can't ever thank what this program has given us, and it was because we were willing to carry the message. Okay, the next person is going to talk about something that's very important to me. You notice we're not talking about what we've done to get here. We're talking about what we've done since we've been here. The next guy's got 50 some odd years clean, and he's going to talk about sponsorship. See, I don't sponsor anyone. Jimmy made me make one promise. Don't ever sponsor an addict. You're breaking all the damn friggin' traditions as it is, and it took me 23 years to even work the second step. So I like number 1 and number 12, and that stuff in between didn't mean too damn much to me. And I done my little thing, and you'll hear my story later. But Norm, will you come up and tell us how important this